Hello and welcome to the Nature Backed podcast. We are here live from Impact Day in Tallinn, and today my first guest is Niklas Kaskeala. Hello, Niklas. So you're founder and chief impact officer at ImpactOffice.Earth.
Yes.
Quite the mouthful.
Yeah.
So please tell us, what exactly do you do?
Okay, thanks. Thanks for having me, first of all. So, I've been working on sustainability, climate change, sustainable development for the past 20 years. First in civil society, in different international civil society organizations, and then more recently, together with businesses. And about a year ago, I founded my own consultancy, ImpactOffice.Earth, through which I help companies go beyond sustainability to achieve more impact. But then I'm also still very heavily involved with several NGOs and non-profits. I founded Protect Our Winters, or the Finnish chapter of this Protect Our Winters movement, which is a climate movement for the winter sports community. I'm chairperson of Pro Veggie, which is an association in Finland that advances plant-based food. I'm chairperson of the Compensate Foundation that works in carbon markets and nature markets, trying to improve their integrity. So I have various roles.
Okay.
And then I'm also, I also manage public affairs for Oatly in Finland. So lots of roles.
Okay, so this Protect Our Winters, this is very interesting. Tell us a little bit more about that. The minute you said winter sports, my ears pricked up.
Yeah. So actually about, what would I say, about 20 years ago, the movement started, or 2007-8, the movement started in the US, where some snowboarders, especially a guy called Jeremy Jones, who was really one of the world's best free riders, noticed that his own community wasn't doing anything to combat climate change or the climate crisis, while they were already seeing the impacts and effects of the climate crisis on their own hobbies and their own lifestyles.
Yeah.
So I've been skiing since I was 2 years old, and I also have I'm very passionate about winter sports. So about 10 years ago, I picked up the phone and called the US and asked if I can create a Finnish chapter for Protect Our Winters, and ever since I've been involved with that. And nowadays I think Protect Our Winters is in 20 different countries, and trying to mobilize the winter sports community to kind of use their passion for what they love, the outdoors, winter sports, etc., and turn that passion into purpose in terms of combating climate change and preventing climate change from actually preventing us from having winter sports anymore. So climate crisis is actually an existential threat to winter sports. So it's turning that passion we have today into purpose is what we try to do.
Okay, give us an example of what you've done in Finland then.
We do a lot of political advocacy, especially in the area of mobility, because traveling to the mountains, traveling to the snow is the main cause of emissions within the winter sports community. So we really want to focus on that. But then we work very closely with ski resorts, with brands, trying to push them to be also more vocal when it comes to them being active, not just limiting their emissions, but being more proactive, and maybe also encouraging, for example, the visitors to the ski resorts to arrive by land-based travel instead of air travel, for example. So these type of things.
Is there any, I suppose this might be more anecdotally than anything, but we're not getting as much snow. I'm Scottish. We don't get as much snow as we did when I was younger. Sometimes there's no ski season in Scotland or whatever. Does this mean that we have less people interested in winter sports, or are those people then traveling to further away than to, have their sports holidays or whatever?
It's definitely happening. I can see. I live in southern Finland, which is, people might think of Finland as a very cold and wintry place, but actually southern Finland, which is by the Baltic Sea, means that it's quite mild during the winters, and we don't have.
Mild might be relevant. Sorry, I live in Estonia, and it's not a mild winter.
Compared to northern Finland, it's mild. So we actually, we can nowadays have winters without any snow, and that never happened before. The climate crisis is actually warming winters much more than summers when it comes to the northern parts of Europe. Certain winter months like December have already warmed by 5 degrees Celsius since pre-industrial times. So it is already happening, and if if the climate keeps warming at the current pace,
yes,
by around like mid-century, a bit after mid-century, the climate in Finland and Sweden will resemble the climate of Poland or Hungary these days.
Okay.
So that's goodbye winter sports in many cases. Yeah.
That would
So
be a
that's
shame.
what I mean with an existential threat.
Yes. No, I understand. Okay, let's talk about ImpactOffice.Earth, which I managed to say correctly this time.
Yeah.
So what is it that you do there? And also explain to me a little bit about what is the main issue that businesses have sort of scaling their sustainability and their impact?
Well, actually what I do is I try to show that sustainability is not enough. So we have immense global challenges. We've crossed 6 of what are so-called planetary boundaries, within which sort of create a safe operating space for humanity.
Yeah.
We're way beyond where we should be on climate change, nature loss. We're close to the 6th mass extinction of species, all because of human activity. So if you think about traditional sustainability, it's about limiting the harm you cause, right? It's about reducing emissions 5% this year, 5% next year, etc. Maybe reaching 50% emission reductions by 2035.
Okay.
But that's like this narrative or this framework of limiting the harm is no longer enough, because we're already on overtime in many of these cases. So what we should be focusing on, and I think traditional sustainability thinking actually prevents us from realizing this, is that we should be focusing on creating positive impact and not on how do we minimize the harm we cause. Because if we think about minimizing harm, we don't really question if the business model in itself is future-proof.
Yeah.
Can we have such, like fossil fuel companies are the perfect example. Obviously they shouldn't exist anymore, or like pretty soon. But what they're trying to do is reduce their emissions. Or airlines are a good example. They're maybe introducing sustainable aviation fuel. So in 10 years from now, 10% of the fuel they use is sustainable. 90% will still be fossil. So that's the sort of false paradigm that prevents us from seeing that that's not the solution. The solution is to question those business models and think about creating new ones that are all about like rebuilding, ecological rebuilding or restoration that needs to take place.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm trying to, with my clients and the businesses I work with, is to open their eyes and see how they can change the business model, and then also to think about what their impact on society is beyond the products or services that they have. So how they use their voice, how they use their purchasing power, how they use their political advocacy in order to like enhance or for broader societal change, and not just think about how they limit, not to think about their like scope just through the products or services that they have.
Is this an ongoing thing all the time, or is there something that companies can do immediately to kind of kickstart their journey? Well,
I think first they need to realize what I realized some years ago, is that this sustainability is only a sort of a mid or short-term goal. We need to quickly go beyond that.
Okay.
So I'll give you an example. So the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is the biggest or the best metric for are we doing enough in terms of climate change. When I was born, it was 337 parts per million. Now it's about 420 something. But the safe limit would be 350 parts per million.
Okay.
And we crossed that in 1987. So we've gone way beyond the point of the safe limit, sort of. But what are we doing every day? We're adding more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, each and every one of us, every company. So even if we were to like miraculously stop emitting today, we would still have a huge issue with too much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. It's sort of like having a bathtub. If the bathtub is the atmosphere and the water that's running in there is the carbon dioxide, we've had the tap on for centuries, decades, and the water is already overflowing. It's so high up that it's flowing over the edges of the bathtub. So our solution can't be just to turn the tap off by 5% this year, 5% next year. It'll just contribute to the problem even more. We need to close it, but then we also need to remove the plug and drain the excess water out. So this is what I'm trying to say, that like a traditional sustainability approach, which is focusing on limiting harm, is missing the big problem, which should be how do we create, for example, business models that remove more carbon dioxide from the atmosphere than they emit.
Yes.
So it's kind of changing this paradigm around and seeing, and this sort of realization is the first step I think businesses have to take. Then what that leads to depends on the market or where they operate. But this sort of wake-up call should happen first.
And also, I'm interested in, do businesses take ownership as well of the carbon emissions, say, throughout the whole supply chain, you know? How does that work? How does that factor into calculating their carbon emissions?
Yeah, I mean, through the different frameworks today, science-based targets, etc., obviously you need to calculate and report on all your value chain emissions, including scope 3, which is the tricky one.
Yeah.
But I would say that even like taking that into account is really not enough if you're still just working on, you know, minimizing it incrementally, the emissions in your value chain.
Yeah.
You should really think about focusing your work on how do you actually, like, how the sort of core business model doesn't require minimizing harm, but rather maximizing your positive impact.
Okay, so it's not just thinking inwardly, but also looking outwardly across.
Exactly, and how you use your influence in order to change your value chain as well. And there, it's not just your business transactions, but also how you work through your advocacy work, how you do your like consumer outreach, how you, for example, try to impact consumer behavior. So it's about like having a broader kind of mission and really like questioning, why does your company exist?
Yeah. Okay.
Philosophical, right?
Yeah. Gone very deep now.
Yeah.
Okay, and the last thing I wanted to ask is, are we going to get past this using sustainability as a token gesture, you know, like a box-ticking exercise in companies like?
Well, right now a lot of companies are really focused on there's been a lot of EU directives lately that put them under a lot of pressure in terms of their reporting. Some of it's good because it also like requires them to really think about like what are the, like doing these materiality analyses and so forth. They really think about where their impact is. But other parts of it are sort of maybe like using the resources that these companies have to just tick boxes or fill in Excel sheets, etc. So I hope we're still maybe in a learning stage with some of these frameworks. Maybe in the future, like some of the processes can be automized, and that frees up the sustainability professionals like time and thinking to think about more creatively how they can tackle the issue, not just do compliance sustainability, but actually think about the positive impact they can have.
Okay, you were doing a keynote there before we grabbed you for the podcast. How did that go, and are you feeling some kind of good vibes coming from the audience here today?
Yeah, it was nice. A few people came and really thanked me, but I was really rushed here, like right off stage. So, but I'll head back to listen to more keynotes. I think there's a really interesting program in the afternoon as well. So, looking forward.
Okay, great. Yeah. Listen, thanks so much for joining us on the podcast. I really appreciate it. And we are going to be back with the Nature Backed podcast going live from Impact Day. So don't go away.